I remember when I was a bit younger in my early teen years in the ancient time of 2019, and my dad decided to take me to see the live-action Dumbo movie. And I didn't ask him or wanted to see it, but since it was a nice gesture, I was excited to see it anyways. So when I got to the theater, I'm not exaggerating when I say this was genuinely one of the worst theater experiences I've ever had in my entire life. Because this movie was just so boring. I couldn't pay attention. I wanted to get up and walk. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep at least 3 separate times. Overall, it's not a good movie. I swear to God, I was going through the 7 stages of denial and grief, and I probably unlocked a 8th secret stage. It was just that bad. This has nothing to do with the video, by the way. I just wanted to get that off my chest because holy shit. Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of those shows that are known by many people in the West as the best cartoon ever created. And whether that's true or not is totally subjective, but no matter what you say, you'll always be objectively wrong, in my opinion, because you cannot deny its everlasting impact on the world, and especially me. Like, I'm not kidding. I had the Avatar shirts, Avatar toys, Avatar sippy cup. I even had the Avatar bust down watch, man. It was kind of insane. I was kind of a loser. The perfection of Avatar as a series simply cannot be understated. The character writing, the animation, the world building, the music, the sound design, the Cabbage Man, just about everything in this series is so well rounded, and it's probably up there with Full Metal Alchemist as one of the most consistent pieces of media I've ever consumed. It's over a decade old and is still relevant many, many years later. But throughout those years, those cold, long, agonizing years, studios tried their damnedest to branch out this series into other mediums. There was a live-action movie that literally everyone in the entire world hated. There was a video game that literally everyone in the entire world hated. There was also another video game that, you guessed it, literally everyone in the entire world hated. And most recently, there was a show. And it seems that people are half and half on it. And after watching the show myself, I can finally say that it was okay, you know. It was cool, you know. I like the beat. When it comes to adapting an animated show or movie into live action, there's always one very important question that everyone seems to ask before it drops, and that's, why does this exist? Is this a story that really needs to be told in live action? And so far, the live action Avatar answers that question fairly well. It exists to simply tell a story, but in a slightly different light, while adding more elements that were either forgotten or not expanded upon in the original, which is great. That's perfect. We now know why it exists, but does it validate its existence by delivering on the changes? Well, kinda, but not really. When it comes to live-action adaptations, changes are kinda inevitable, especially with a series like Avatar that's borderline an anime. No one wants to see a show or a movie that's pretty much the exact same thing, but instead it's with real people this time. Guys, did you hear that? It's with real people this time. We're like Game of Thrones now. Remember that show? You guys loved that once until like the final season. But yeah, the main reason people refrain from doing that is because that would be boring and pointless. But then again, the live action Lion King movie made like $1 billion at the box office for doing just that, so maybe I'm stupid. But the point is, change is like Thanos. It is inevitable. However, if you're going to change elements of the show to make it work for live action, you have to fully commit to it. Working with live action is kind of like the butterfly effect. You change one thing, even if it's as minuscule as a small character detail, and you can risk fucking up entire character motivations, themes, character arcs, and even the plot itself in the process. If you're going to make changes, those changes have to be thematically consistent with the story you're writing and trying to tell, with the medium it's being told in. And don't get me wrong though, there are many things I liked about the show, but it's kind of a shame that this show wasn't, you know, amazing, because I feel that the show could have been so much more. I wasn't overwhelmed or underwhelmed. I was just kind of whelmed a little bit. It was just like, okay, I guess. The casting for this series is one of the first things that worried me when I heard it was being announced, because Avatar is one of those shows that needs to be racially and culturally significant, each location pulling from a real-life culture as the base for their inspiration. Fire Nation based on Japan, Earth Kingdom based on China, Air Nomads based on Tibetan and Buddhist monks, and Water Tribes based on Inuit or indigenous cultures. So we honestly didn't need another Avatar where most of the cast were just, you know, white people. And no offense to white people or anything, you know, shout out John Cena, but like I've mentioned before, Avatar is one of those series where this sort of thing is very important. A lot of the themes and symbolism would be completely lost if otherwise. So it was a very pleasant surprise to me that a lot of the cast, for the most part, is fairly accurate. I think they did a pretty good job with casting these characters. Aang, Iroh, Zuko, Azula, Bumi, Zhao, and others, in my opinion, fit their roles perfectly, at least in terms of pure vibe and aesthetic. The only issue I have is with Sokka. I heard some time ago before the show aired that the actor portraying Sokka lied about being indigenous to get the role, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way the entire time I was watching. To me, it's not really a crazy big issue or anything. He still gives slight Sokka energy in his performance and was quirky enough, but it's like, damn, that's kind of fucked up. Speaking of the performances, that's also a very important part of casting. Sure, someone can look the part, but if they can't act the part, then it'll leave the audience kind of scratching their heads a bit. And I think the cast did fairly well with what they were given. Despite the fact that a lot of the main cast are either new or child actors, I think they managed to convey a lot of nuance and emotion into their performances. These kids have range, man. Oh my god, they kinda cookin'. And I can't praise them enough for that. My favorite performances were probably Aang and Azula. Considering Aang's actor is the youngest out of the cast, I'd expected him to at least produce a wee bit of cringe in line delivery, and yeah, he does sometimes, but this kid is quite literally Aang himself. He has the charisma, the laugh, the quirky airheadedness. I honestly couldn't imagine a better fit for Aang. For Azula, she doesn't come off as cartoonishly snobby as she did in the original, and that's probably for the best. Like, yeah, she definitely is a dickhead in the live action, but it's not too over the top, and I think that's perfectly fine for the show's tone. Another important part of the casting is the wardrobe. Do the characters drip, or do they drown? Do they pass the almighty judgment of the subject juice fit check? Or do they need to go back into the closet? And honestly, I think they pass with flying colors. The wardrobe itself is probably my favorite aspect of this show so far. They are simplistic enough to be maneuverable, while the actors are constantly moving, while also giving a bit more detail and flexibility in style. Unlike the first live-action Avatar, the costume designs here feel more vibrant and lively. Very warm, welcoming colors that contrast well enough with the lighting of whichever scene they're in, as opposed to the movie where the colors felt gray, lifeless, and kinda boring. Kinda like this 5-week-old bag of spinach I have in my fridge. You know, I should probably throw this out. The visual effects in this show is also a part where I felt the most worried, because Avatar is a series that works best in animation. All these characters are doing cartwheels and backflips and all this other wacky shit that I figured it might be quite difficult to pull something like that off, while simultaneously trying to not make it look like, you know, straight ass. And more than anything, they surprised me yet again because, my god, these bastards really done did it. The visual effects in this show really impressed me. I wasn't too shocked that the creatures of this world looked amazing, because they did have the budget of like a Marvel movie for their show. Like, the fur on Appa and Momo looked absolutely crazy. Like, holy fucking smokes, man. Shout out to their barber dog. They also did a really good job at making Ko the face stealer just as hauntingly creepy as he did in the animation, which could have gone south very quickly if not handled properly. I do wish they lighted the scene better though, because I honestly could barely see anything unless I was turning the brightness all the way up, which is kind of crazy. But what really got me the most was the bending. That's one aspect they simply could not have gotten wrong under any circumstance whatsoever, because I know we all remember the last time where it took like 5 earthbenders to move a single rock. We cannot have that again. My soul simply cannot take it, guys. But these guys did pretty good. Even though it's not as fluid and static as the animated show, the bending sequences flow fairly well. I think the elements that work the best in live action is probably fire and water. And that's probably because most studios have gotten exceptionally good when it comes to crafting fire and water effects with animation. I really love this one part with Iroh and Zuko escaping an Earth Kingdom troop. The fire effects especially complement the choreography in this scene very well. Nothing but praise for fire and water, but the visual effects for air and earth on the other hand look kinda stinky.
So you doing the bending?
More times than not, they do look great, but in certain scenes they are really janky and kinda uncanny looking. Oftentimes not having enough weight to make the scene as impactful as I think it probably should be. Almost to a cartoonish degree, and when you're working in live action, that's not really a good thing. Like in the fight with Aang versus Bumi, visually it looks okay for the most part, but when Bumi actually starts to bend Earth more, it kinda feels weightless. Earth is supposed to be a firm and sturdy element, and the actor for Bumi most definitely had the stance of an earthbender down to a T, but the VFX doesn't really match that sometimes. This issue also applies to Aang when airbending, but enough of my silly nitpicking, because overall, I think the VFX team did a really good job. Now it's time for me to be a negative Nancy and talk about the I'm not going to go over every single change or issue I had with this series because I'd probably be here for at least 5 hours minimum, but I do want to bring to attention the most apparent issues I think the live action had and try my best to verbalize why I think they don't really work all too well. But before I get into that, I do want to say that I do love a lot about the additions they've added to further enhance the pre-established lore and world building of Avatar, such as the genocide of the air nomads or more insight on Azula's character leading up to her initial introduction in season 2. It wasn't a necessary addition by any means, but it's things like that that truly enhance the experience, so props to the team for that. So the first of the changes I've noticed with the series is that there seems to be a lot of cut or straight up unused content from a handful of episodes. Large portions of Imprisoned, the Waterbending Scroll, the Fortune Teller, the Deserter, and more were either briefly referenced, moved, or just not mentioned at all. And I think that's an issue because it kind of messes with the pacing of the series a bit. Like, damn, why are we going so fucking fast, boy? A lot of these episodes in the original, while not the most important in terms of pushing the narrative forward, does a lot for building Team Avatar as characters and making us actually care about who they are as people outside of just the goals they want to achieve. It could be possible that they're saving some of these for season 2, such as Zhang teaching Aang firebending, but I don't think it's a justifiable change if it's at the expense of a character's likability, ideals, or motives. Like, yes, I want to see more of Aang going around and being a silly little guy. I want to see more lighthearted fun shenanigans between him and the others, but to me, some of that initial charm is lost. There are a few moments here and there where we get that, like this one scene where Aang and Katara are splashing each other with water. Like, that's some good shit, that's cute, that's adorable. But since everything in this series is going at such a breakneck speed to get to the seriousness of the next overarching plot point, we don't get much of that, which would work well in any other series, but in Avatar, where a large portion of the appeal is the found family dynamic of these characters, I think they dropped the ball on that one just a bit. Another big change was Aang and Zuko, both their characters individually as well as their dynamic in season 1, which I'll most definitely get to in a bit. Aang, just like his animated counterpart, has the same innocence and sweet childlike charm, but I think where they differ the most is in their goals. Where in the animated series, Aang wakes up and fucks around a bit, of course, but after he realizes the seriousness of the situation, he wants to actively learn all the elements to put an end to all the genocidal shenanigans the Fire Nation had. Compared to the live action, while yes, he does most definitely take the task at hand seriously, it seems like he needs more of a push to actively want to learn bending. Like in the entire season, Aang rarely thinks about wanting to learn waterbending. In fact, he doesn't even learn waterbending at all. Not a single ounce of water was bent by Aang in the season titled Book of Water. And it's not until Avatar Kyoshi reminds him where he goes, "Oh shit, you're right. I'm the Avatar." I'm not sure why they made this change, but it just doesn't work because it makes Aang seem less competent than he actually is. In the original series, he most definitely was a certified lollygagger, but he had the perfect balance in situations where it mattered the most. The live action wants it to seem as if Aang is more mature and serious, and how he's insanely weighted by the pressures of being the Avatar, but completely dismiss one of his biggest priorities and responsibilities, you know, as the Avatar, which is definitely a choice for sure. I also don't like how they handled Aang and Bumi's dynamic. It's almost a one-to-one adaptation in regards to the events that take place, but they altered Bumi's character so much. In the animated show, Bumi is a silly little old man who makes corny jokes, who just wants to test Aang's ability. But in the live action, while Bumi most definitely does test Aang, he now seems excessively angry at Aang for abandoning his responsibilities as the Avatar, which I most definitely understand the frustration, but like, Bumi already knows what Aang and his people went through. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time and objectively had no choice in the matter. He could have at least, come to an understanding of Aang's hardships earlier. Another of Aang's dynamic that I think was kind of botched was the absolute lacking presence of Avatar Roku. Not only was Roku important for Aang's journey of self-discovery, but he also serves as a gateway to a deeper understanding of Aang to Zuko. The concept of a Fire Nation Avatar being his teacher tied further into the parallels between Zuko and Aang, but most of Roku's roles were replaced with Avatar Kyoshi, which would be perfectly fine with me, but outside of getting a minimal amount of insight on Kyoshi's past, she plays almost the same exact role Roku did in the original series, so that change is kinda stinky. Speaking of Zuko parallels though, I unironically think Zuko was the most untouched by the series changes. For the most part, he is the same character. His dynamic with Aang just feels slightly less important in the live action, because a lot of the turmoil was redirected mostly to his father. Deciding to show Ozai's face as soon as possible was a great choice in my opinion, and gives more depth to Ozai and Zuko's dynamic. It does make Ozai slightly less intimidating, but I think that's fine because most people already know who Ozai is at this point, and I like how they made Zuko actually fight back a bit when facing his father. But if you ask me, Zuko should have honestly gotten absolutely obliterated here with relative ease, or at least have Iroh step in, because this kind of messes with the gap in power between Ozai and Zuko, both physically and mentally. But my main issue is, even though their relationship is deepened slightly, it makes Ozai seem more kind to Zuko than he was in the original. Like, don't get me wrong, he's still a piece of shit, but it makes it seem that Ozai is just more so disappointed in Zuko, rather than literally hating Zuko with every fiber of his being. In the animated show, he was crude, abusive, and manipulative, and wanted nothing more than to see his least favorite child struggle due to his incompetence. Even when Zuko got accepted back into the Fire Nation, Ozai was still playing level 10 Aizen level tactics with this guy. Ozai's hatred towards Zuko was a very prominent focal point for Zuko's journey as a character, but since that intensity was significantly lowered in the live action, their dynamic feels kinda flat. But enough of Zuko, because outside of that, he's still one of my favorite characters this season. So let's turn our heads all the way over and talk about outside of all of the characters, I think the one that was changed the least was definitely Katara. She's mostly the same and plays the exact same role. The only deviation that was made is her snobbiness. She's not as cranky and strict as she was in the animated series, and I think that works well for a live action setting. Because if I recall correctly, a lot of people initially hated Katara because she was so snobby and annoying, which I don't agree with personally. That was a part of her initial charm, but I'm also perfectly fine with this change. Them toning her down a bit doesn't negate her dynamic with Sokka in the slightest, and they still have just as much chemistry as they did in the original. The issue here though mostly lies with Sokka. Him as a character is perfectly fine, although a little cringe sometimes. He has all the Sokka-isms down to a T, but it seems that they removed his misogyny. Oh my god, no! I feel that a lot of people were definitely exaggerating when the news dropped that Sokka would be slightly less misogynistic in the live action, because it's most definitely still there. It's just not as apparent. However though, I do believe it lessens the relationship Sokka has with the Kyoshi warriors and Suki specifically. Funnily enough, their entire dynamic was unironically founded on his misogyny, and him learning that women are complex people and are just as capable, if not more so, than men was a very nice addition to his arc early on. But in the live action, he comments on it a few times, and that's kinda it. Sokka honestly doesn't even really have an arc for a good portion of the series. He's kinda just there, which definitely is an issue because Sokka is usually the most loudest, obnoxious, unintentionally funniest in the group. But in the new series, he's kinda just like, hey guys, I'm here if you need me, to navigate maybe, or tell a joke or something. This issue also carries on throughout the entire series, where it seems like all of Sokka's dynamics just fall short. And that could partly be due to the changes itself, but I think it's mostly due to the series' pacing. Going back to the issue I've mentioned earlier, where they don't really give the characters time to breathe for the audience to establish a genuine connection with them. Like in the episode where Sokka meets Princess Yue, their dynamic just feels bare, just simply due to the lack of time we've actually spent with these two. And I'm sitting there just like, Damn. I kinda don't care. But outside of that, everything else in this series was just pretty okay. Mid, some would say. So enough of my yapping, it's finally time for the I really do believe Avatar is truly unadaptable, at least for now. Maybe in the next 20 to 30 years, they'll try again with another movie or reboot the show or something, but at this point in time, I really do think it's impossible to exist in a world where a live-action Avatar is a perfect adaptation. And I feel like that's mostly due to one very simple reason, and that's that Avatar is animated. I honestly need a lot of companies, producers, writers, directors, or whoever to come to the realization that animation is an art form, and it's perfectly okay for shows to solely and simply exist in that medium. You don't have to put a cartoon into the Game of Thrones realism machine for general audiences to take it more seriously. The ones who grew up with Avatar are either young adults or already adults who can form a genuine understanding of the subject matter the original cartoon was trying to portray. And that's not to say there is no place for live action, because I like a handful of them myself, and it can most definitely be a good gateway entry for the one old head at the cookout who is always too stubborn to watch animated things because he thinks it's for babies. But like, shut up. But yeah, Avatar live action is really something. I don't think it's a complete disappointment and a disgrace to the original, and everyone who even thinks about watching it should be lobotomized, but it's also not very great either. It's just okay, and if you want to watch it, it's entirely up to you. This is Subject Juice, and I just remembered I ate some of that expired spinach from earlier, so I'm gonna be on the toilet for at least 8 hours. Oh, pray for me, guys. Oh my god, my stomach is bubbling. Holy fuck!